Hi, good evening, everyone. It's Mayor Weinstein with Never Again. I'm joined with Mayor Jolowitz. I'm going to ask everyone who is watching or viewing if you can please share this on the different platforms that you are on. Now, let me just make sure that it is fully connected. Yes, it is. Okay. I'm Mayor Weinstein, and I'm joined with Mayor Jolowitz. We're going to be discussing tonight the meeting between President Donald Trump and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, Mayor, it's been quite 4 years with the Biden administration, all kinds of sanctions against Israel, in particular, the war against Hamas in Gaza for approximately 15 months. Israel has been held back, Israel has been sanctioned. Jews who live in Judea and Samaria have been sanctioned. There's been all kinds of measures. The Biden administration funding UNRWA after it's been proven conclusively that it is UNRWA slash Hamas. And then President Trump comes in. It's 2 weeks already. He's not funding UNRWA anymore. He's talking about moving the Arabs from Gaza out. He holds a pen today to the media when they start asking him questions about Israel, and he says, "You see this pen, this beautiful pen? This is the size of Israel, and my desk is the size approximately of the Middle East." And he's emphasizing it's like he's got Israel's back, and he understands what is going on, what the situation is. Mayor, it's been a tough 15 months and 4 years of the Biden administration. What should we expect from the meeting between Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump tomorrow?
Well, it's a complete reversal. It's a volte-face of what we've experienced for 4 years, where we had an American administration and a State Department which is always antagonistic to Israel, which is more antagonistic than any has ever been. And there's no need to pretend otherwise. What Trump has done in just a few days that he's actually been running the show is just absolutely miraculous. He was a wonderful president for Israel, and as president at 45, we trust that he'll even be a better one at 47. Allow me just one cautionary note. Donald Trump has advertised himself several times as being both a unifier and a peacemaker. And as a unifier and peacemaker, I just am concerned that he not rush to make deals which might not be in Israel's best interest. And I'll just use as a backdrop, not that I want to get into it, the hostage deal with the ceasefire. There are two conditions which Israel has agreed to, which were not part of the plan that Trump had spoken about as a candidate, nor after he was elected on November 5th. The one was that there's humanitarian aid that's flooding into Gaza, which of course sustains Hamas rather than drives them out. And the other is the fact that Israel has agreed in phase 2 of the second 42 days that Israel was going to withdraw its troops from Gaza and vacate also the Philadelphia corridor. Those are contrary to what we assumed Trump was going to do, and we trust that that will not be the case. But that is what the agreement is. And the agreement drafted actually by Biden and Blinken and implemented by Steve Witkoff. Right. Something I'm not happy about. But let me tell you what I am happy about and what all supporters of Israel should be happy about. And because our time is precious, as I kiddingly said, no adjectives, no adverbs, we'll just cut to the chase. Right. Ambassador Danny Danon, Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, said today that we're about to get into this is the start of a new era between Israel and the United States. And I trust that will be the case. In order for that to be the case, allow me 5 very succinct bullet points of issues which need to be discussed. Bibi Netanyahu needs to make sure that Donald Trump understands, because it's the very nature of what underscores the problem in the Middle East. First one, Bibi Netanyahu has to make sure that Donald Trump understands that the conflict in the Middle East isn't Israeli-Palestinian, as it has been falsely labeled. It is the Arab war against Israel or the Muslim war against the Jews. It is a religious war, and the mistake that's made by everyone is the assumption that it's a territorial war. If it is in fact a territorial war, then pushing the right buttons and moving the right lines in the right places in the right maps will somehow allow a two-state solution. The war is not territorial, it is religious. Donald Trump needs to understand that. You simply don't walk into an office and move some lines and all of a sudden find an accommodation on both sides. Second point that I want to bring up, it's the understanding that, especially as regards Gaza, there have been ceasefires before, January of 2009, 2012, 2014, and 2021. Each of the ceasefire Israel had agreed to while Israel had the upper hand, and it was to Israel's detriment because all the Hamas forces did was they went back, they had the respite, they rearmed, they retooled, and then what we got October 7th. The last ceasefire was one which was extant. It was in place on October 7th when the Arabs attacked from Gaza. That's the second point. The understanding that the ceasefire is not in Israel's best interest. And there are very few people who would argue with that. Certainly no military mind. Third point, in discussing negotiations, and not only talking about brokering the peace, not only talking about the hostage situation, but the day after, the future of Gaza. There's a terrible misunderstanding on the part of the American State Department, and it needs to be corrected, and on the part of Donald Trump himself, that Egypt, Qatar, and Turkey can be used as honest brokers. They are not honest brokers. They are either sponsors and or supporters of Hamas. Bibi needs to learn that himself, that the element of those three nations involved in negotiations is to Israel's detriment. Fourth point that needs to be brought into play is the day after, the future of Gaza. The notion that any Arab element, even if it represents what the world seems to think are moderate Arab nations, should have no role in administering or governing Gaza. That is something there's only one party that can be trusted to govern Gaza, and even then, sometimes we do. It's Israel. It certainly should not be Egypt. And the worst part of it is because the American administration is open to the fact, and we find out definitively that the Palestinian Authority, the PA, which has a pay-for-slave program, which doesn't believe in Israel's right to exist, which is a murderous organization, no different than Hamas, the PA is already administering some control over Rafah, which is insanity. The last point that needs to be made sure is the expectation or the understanding that a normalization of relations between Israel and the Saudis, Saudi Arabia, which for Trump is that big feather in his cap, that it not be conditioned on two things. It cannot be conditioned on the beginning of an establishment of discussions for a Palestinian state. That is off the table. And the second condition is, because the Saudis, no one talks about it, but the Saudis will indeed bring it up. People can reference this podcast in another year, which is the Saudis want the American blessing to begin what they call a peaceful nuclear capability. And we don't know. Every one of these Arab regimes is a one-bullet regime. You don't do that. Those are the five conditions. That it's absolutely imperative that Bibi and Trump be on the same page. One last thing. Each of these things lends to the elephant in the room. It's the biggest concern that Israel has, bigger than anything that we've encountered yet, is the push by the Western world and leftist elements in Israel for the two-state delusion. We have to make sure that Trump understands that that is a non-starter.
Can you elaborate a little bit when you made the comment about these Arab regimes are a one bullet away regime?
Yeah, it was actually, thank you. It was actually a comment, I think, proper attribution. I think it was Shmuel Katz, a brilliant, wonderful Zionist South African born, who at one time, many decades ago, was actually, for a short while when he was young, secretary to Jabotinsky. He was one of Menachem Begin's dear friends. He penned a piece in the Jerusalem Post 2 generations ago, in which he was cautioning about the peace treaty that Israel was about to enter with Egypt. And he said Israel has to be very careful not to give up things which might come back and bite it in the butt. And he was talking about, he said, if you take a look at the Arab world, even those forces which at the time were considered somewhat more moderate than the others, he said, in the Arab world, there's no democracy. The only way that the regime changes is either a father hands it over to his son, or the father is shot by the cousin and he takes over. It is, and he described it, the words that he used is, it's a one-bullet regime. We saw that, by the way, when Mubarak fell, ostensibly a friend of the West, and we saw Mubarak went down. He wasn't shot, but in essence, he was replaced by Morsi, who was the Muslim Brotherhood. Again, when Morsi was deposed, once again, we came back to an Egypt which is a little more accommodating. The same thing can happen with any of the countries which we consider to be moderate. It can happen. It has happened historically many times in Saudi Arabia. So Shmuel Katz was referring to them as a one-bullet regime, as opposed to Israel, which had an assassination. It had an assassination, 95, of an Israeli prime minister. But Israel as a democracy was not endangered. That is not true of the Arab world.
Right. Okay, we're coming close to the end, and we're going to be moving forward. We're going to have a series of podcasts to stay on top of what's going on, and that's very important. But to conclude, the meetings tomorrow, what should we look at? What should we pay attention to?
We need to make sure. There was a slight hiccup in their relationship a couple of years ago. We want to make sure, when I say there, I'm talking about Bibi Netanyahu and Donald Trump. We want to make sure that that is fully mended. We want to make sure that it's fully mended. We want to make sure that the United States understands that its only reliable ally in the Middle East. It's not Saudis, it's not the UAE, it's not Kuwait, it is Israel. It is the only reliable ally. That will always be the case. On the flip side of that coin is that the United States, over the past 25 years, with the compliance, tragically, of Israeli prime ministers, got Israel to be less productive in building their own armaments, establishing their own military arsenal, which is one of the reasons why Israel was so dependent upon the Biden administration when it came to needing weapons. And the Biden administration threatened an embargo and the bombs of a certain size and the weapons that they were willing to give Israel. Let us not forget, were defensive weapons. Defensive weapons. Israel doesn't need defensive weapons. Israel needs the ability to send a message to the Arab enemy that if you do something that you shouldn't do, you will pay the price, possibly with your own existence. And that is the only way. There's not going to be peace. I listen to everyone talk about peace. They talk about the peace of the Abraham Accords. What we're looking for is a state of non-violence. And the way to do it is for Israel to be independent enough in the manufacture of its own weapons that it doesn't rely on whomever might follow Donald Trump. We saw that happen before. We can't allow it to happen again.
Absolutely. Meir, thank you very much for joining us. And again, to all our viewers, if you could please share this on whatever platform you use, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, WhatsApp groups, we'd appreciate it. Thank you very much. And we'll continue with our podcast in the next few days. Thank you very much. Shalom, shalom.
Thank you.